Assalamu alaikum. My name is Professor Wasim Hanif. I'm a professor of diabetes and endocrinology in Birmingham. Today I'll be talking about the using of continuous glucose monitoring in Ramadan for a safer fasting. Technology in diabetes has improved leaps and bounds in the last 5 to 10 years. And this has completely changed the management of diabetes for all our patients. And it has huge implications for patients who are fasting during the holy month of Ramadan. Now, in the next 10 to 12 minutes, I will try and explain to you by using these technologies, it is possible for almost, and I say almost all people with diabetes to fast safer in Ramadan. So, how things have changed? The changing landscape. Initially, we had self monitoring of blood glucose levels by which we asked the patients to test the blood sugars, sometimes painfully, 3 to 4 times a day, especially when they were fasting, and this was quite difficult and unpleasant for the patients. We measured their glycemic control by using glycosylated hemoglobin, which was a 3 month average reading of the blood glucose levels. And HbA1c, although is a gold standard, it had certain implications, especially in certain populations. For people with type 1 diabetes, we had open loops, which meant they would monitor their blood glucose levels and adjust their basal rates of insulin pumps. But things have changed. Instead of self monitoring of blood glucose levels, now we have got CGMs. Mostly in almost all countries, we're now using real time CGM, which means you are able to record your blood glucose levels throughout the day for 24 hours. Instead of HbA1c, we have got time in range, which is the amount of blood glucose times when the blood glucose levels are in the agreed target range. And instead of open loop systems, we have got hybrid closed loops, and we are moving towards closed loop systems. So, if you go back into the history of the development of technology in diabetes, technology has played a major role in improving the lives of people with diabetes and also to improve their outcomes. Right from 1920, when the first commercially made insulin was discovered and became available in 1923, to the 1960s when self-monitoring of blood glucose levels happened, to the intravenous insulin pumps which developed in 60s, and you could see it was like a big space pack to carry, to the 2000s when we had more sophisticated meters to monitor the blood glucose levels, to the CGMs, and now to closed hybrid loops. So, what are the devices available for us to do the CGM? So, currently in the UK and in most countries, there are a variety of devices available. The most popular one that is used in the UK is the Freestyle Liberate 2. Now you've got a Liberate 3 and Liberate 2 Plus version. It is a sensor which you attach, and it can be attached either to your smartphone or to a reader, and it records the blood glucose levels for 24 hours. Similarly, we have got Dexcom 1, 6, and 7, which are much more advanced systems, usually used in people with type 1 diabetes and especially with closed loops. So there's a huge amount of technological development happening in terms of the availability of CGM. So do the CGMs work? Do they have a role? So this is an ABCD, Association of British Clinical Diabetologists, nationwide flash glucose monitoring audit between 2017 and 2019. And what it showed was that in patients who use a CGM, there was a marked improvement in diabetes control, both in terms of the HbA1c as well as their time in range targets. Similarly, the same audit also showed that the incidence of hypoglycemia measured by the gold score came down significantly, with 53% with gold scores of greater than 4 were less than 4 at follow-up, showing a significant improvement in hypoglycemia in patients using these devices. So, how do we measure or use the CGM? So, this is the clinical targets for continuous glucose monitoring data interpretations, and this is the recommendation from the International Consensus on Time and Range. The target for the patients in most cases is to have a target range of at least 70% with no greater than 70% with no hypos. This has got a special significance during the month of Ramadan because it actually tells the person exactly what the blood glucose levels are doing, when they're going up, when they're going down, and this helps us them to not only predict hypoglycemia but also adjust the dose of medications, especially insulins. And if the blood glucose levels are going dangerously low, they always have the option of breaking their fast. So most of the CGMs have got their meters, have got arrows, which indicate what is happening with the blood glucose levels at that time and what is going to happen at a later stage. This is specifically used for patients if they're on insulin pumps and they can change their rates depending upon the changes in the blood glucose levels. And this is a quite an useful indications, not only for patients when they're fasting, because if their arrows are coming down, it is an indication that the blood glucose levels are going to fall further and they should take an action and consider breaking the fast. Similarly, somebody with type 1 diabetes, if the blood glucose levels are climbing and climbing dangerously, it is an indication for them to consider breaking the fast and taking the extra insulin. So it's a very good guide and has helped the patients to really decide what they need to do. As I explained earlier, so if somebody has started a fast and early in the morning they notice their blood sugars are 5.6 and they're going down, it is an indication for them to consider breaking the fast. Similarly, just before iftar time, if they notice their blood glucose levels are low and they're going low further, then they have to take a call instead of delaying the breaking the fast or opening on time. They have to do it. They have to do it early. The the CGM also gives an indication of nighttime hypoglycemia, which is extremely helpful in people. So if somebody is fasting during Ramadan and they notice that they're having nighttime hypoglycemia, it is time to adjust the insulin dose at the iftar time and also make adjustments to their carbohydrate intake. As a rule of thumb, if the blood glucose levels are going to less than 6 millimoles, then the patients need to 4 to 5 grams of one dextrose tablets. And if the arrow is pointing really down, they need 8 to 10 grams, which is two dextrose tablets. How the action needed will depend on a number of factors, including the insulin on board and recent activity. This was the thing for the intermittent CGM when it was used, but now most of the CGM is continuous, which means that you get, if you have got a reader or a smartphone next to you, or especially the smartphone, you get the continuous CGM reading. There are certain times of the days when it's important to look at the CGM. One is pre-meals, 2 to 3 hours post-meal during Ramadan at the suhoor time, 3 hours after waking up during the midday, before before breaking the fast, and before going to the bed, and 2 hours after breaking the fast. So this really helps us to get a full picture, and there are graphs available which show the 24-hour intake. In Ramadan, there has been some studies with the use of CGM. This was a Daphne Ramadan with CGM in people with type 1 diabetes, and it actually showed that the incidence of hypoglycemia came down significantly in people using CGM. Although we are talking about the CGM and how they have really changed the management of diabetes and can help patients fasting in Ramadan, the other devices, algorithms, and automations that are becoming available, which will have a huge impact on people fasting in diabetes. One of these has been the progression of what we call the closed loop algorithm. In the first generation, we had very low glucose insulin off pumps. Then we had hypoglycemic minimizers. Then we had hypo and hyperglycemic minimizers. Now we have under the second generation, they've got automated basal hybrid closed loops, and we are in power to develop fully automated insulin closed loop, and finally to a fully automated multi-hormone closed loop with glucagon added to avoid hypoglycemia and almost, and I'd say almost, be an artificial pancreas. Insulin basal pump, blood insulin levels reach a steady state after 2 to 5 hours after a basal rate, and this helps us to estimate what the hourly basal rate is. There have been studies about the use of insulin pump therapy in patients with type 1 diabetes during Ramadan fasting. This is an observational studies. In 49 of the 63 patients with type 1 fasted, decreased the basic levels by 5 to 50%. 17 patients had hypoglycemia requiring to break the fast, and 9 patients had unexpected hypoglycemia. Again, showing that even with people with type 1 diabetes, it is now possible to fast safely with CGM and insulin pumps. This is another study of use of automated insulin delivery system in people with type 1 diabetes fasting during Ramadan, again showing beneficial effects of these technologies. So, in conclusion, what is now very clear with the development of technology is that almost all people with diabetes who want to fast in Ramadan will be able to do so with available of technology. The challenge here is education, empowerment. Advanced technologies and new therapies can provide effective risk mitigation strategies for people fasting in with diabetes during Ramadan. This requires a higher literacy rate, a health literacy, digital literacy, access to technologies, and recent therapies. These remain barriers, especially in the developing world, where the cost of these technologies and new therapies is very high. And in the countries like UK, where these technologies are available freely in the NHS, as per the NICE guidelines, there is an issue of inequality because of social deprivation, ethnicity, and extra and the other things that need to be addressed. We in the UK have been working very closely with the Department of Health, NHS England, Diabetes UK to make sure that these technologies are available for people who are fasting during Ramadan with diabetes. The updated guidelines for diabetes management, diabetes risk, should include that all patients who have got access to this technology are at low risk and should be allowed to fast if they choose to do so. Advocacy to provide CGM to all patients with diabetes, including type 2 diabetes during Ramadan, is something that needs to be done globally, especially in the countries where the health system can afford the technology. Thank you very much.